Russia launched the massive drone strike ever recorded on a Ukrainian largest naval warship. At first, it looked like the ship had no chance of surviving. But what happened in the next 10 minutes shocked everyone watching and changed the entire balance of naval warfare in the Black Sea. At 2:20 p.m., under the skies of the Black Sea, radar screens inside Ukraine's largest warship lit up with more than 150 inbound tracks. Russia had unleashed a coordinated strike, a swarm of Shahed-136 kamikaze drones, Orlan reconnaissance aircraft, and explosive unmanned surface vessels. For the crew, this was no drill. They had minutes to prepare before impact. This was not a random skirmish. Intelligence would later confirm the drones had been launched from Crimea under cover of secrecy, staged on hidden platforms, and guided by satellite links. It was a deliberate strike designed to overwhelm defenses and deliver the first confirmed drone kill of a major naval vessel. At 2:22 p.m., the warship's defensive systems roared to life. Vertical launch cells opened, and interceptors streaked upward, leaving white smoke trails. Seconds later, explosions cracked the horizon as the first wave of drones was destroyed in mid-air. Fragments rained into the sea, waves hissing as fireballs collapsed into smoke. But the sky did not clear. More contacts appeared, dozens at once, closing fast from different altitudes and directions. It was a saturation attack meant to exhaust the ship's missiles, ammunition, and crew within minutes. Above deck, close-in weapon systems spun into action, their rotating barrels firing thousands of rounds per minute. The sound thundered across the sea, and tracer fire slashed bright lines into the afternoon air. Several drones were ripped apart just before reaching their targets, erupting in violent fireballs that shook the vessel with shockwaves. But others dived low, skimming the waves and slipping into blind spots. One detonated less than 500 meters away, the explosion lifting water high over the deck. The ship rocked under the pressure, metal groaning under the strain. At 2:26 p.m., the attack showed its full design. Airborne Shaheds came in high and low, forcing radar crews to track targets in every direction. At the same time, sonar screens lit up with new contacts, fast, small vessels racing across the surface. These were unmanned explosive boats, difficult to detect until they were dangerously close. They advanced in groups, creating thin wakes across the sea. The guns shifted downward, hammering the waves in desperate bursts. One boat was destroyed, erupting in a wall of spray. Another detonated early, but several continued forward, cutting through defenses as fire and smoke filled the horizon. The warship system strained under the weight of simultaneous threats. Alarms pulsed in every sector as explosions flashed around the vessel. Black smoke marked destroyed drones, while new waves replaced them instantly. Above, the sky was alive with fire and streaking missiles. Below, the sea rippled with approaching threats. It was clear that the attack was designed not just to damage, but to break the ship completely. By 2:30 p.m., Ukraine's largest naval vessel was locked in a fight for survival against a swarm that showed no sign of stopping. The Ukrainian warship had already intercepted dozens of drones, but the relentless swarm kept pressing in. At 2:32 p.m., the first major breakthroughs came. A Shahed drone dived low and detonated above the forward deck, its blast shredding antennas and damaging fire control radars. Another struck near the stern, tearing open the helicopter landing pad and igniting fuel. A third slammed into the ship's port side, exploding against the armor plating and throwing shrapnel across the superstructure. Smoke rose in thick black columns as secondary fires broke out. Compartments flooded with smoke and flames, while emergency crews struggled to reach damaged sections. While the skies erupted with fire, the sea became even deadlier. Fast, unmanned surface vessels closed in from multiple directions. These boats, packed with hundreds of kilograms of explosives, skimmed low over the water, zigzagging to evade fire. Cannons hammered the waves, destroying some before they reached the hull. Explosions erupted short of the ship, geysers of seawater rising skyward. But the numbers were overwhelming. One after another, the small boats pressed forward, and each one that survived grew closer to a decisive strike. At 2:36 p.m., the first surface drone made contact. It slammed into the port side, just below the waterline. The detonation was catastrophic. A thunderous explosion ripped through the hull, steel bending inward as a massive fireball erupted outward. Water surged into lower compartments instantly, flooding machinery spaces and cutting power to key systems. The ship lurched violently to port, tilting under the sudden rush of seawater. Compartments were sealed, but the intake was too severe. Structural alarms sounded across the vessel as the ship's stability began to collapse. The blast left fires raging across multiple decks. Flames poured from torn-open steel while thick smoke darkened the sky above. Below deck, seawater rushed into exposed compartments, overwhelming pumps and filling the ship at a terrifying rate. The hull groaned under the pressure as bulkheads struggled to hold. Every minute brought the vessel lower into the sea. On the surface, burning wreckage from destroyed drones floated around the warship, staining the waves with fuel and oil. The Ukrainian flagship was now fighting not just the swarm, but the sea itself. By 2:40 p.m., the warship was crippled. Multiple compartments were flooded, key radar systems had been destroyed, and fires continued to spread uncontrollably across the deck. Smoke poured upward in towering black plumes visible for miles along the coast. The swarm had achieved its first decisive breach. What had begun as a desperate defense was now survival against certain collapse. The Ukrainian Navy's largest vessel was mortally wounded, and the outcome of the battle had shifted in Russia's favor. By 2:42 p.m., the Ukrainian warship was visibly listing to port. Water surged into the lower decks faster than pumps could expel it. Compartments sealed earlier were now fully submerged, and the ship's power output began to drop as flooded engines cut offline. Fires burned across the stern, spreading toward ammunition storage. Black smoke trailed into the sky, visible for miles along the Danube Delta. The once proud vessel, centerpiece of Ukraine's fleet, was fighting a losing battle against both flames and flooding. Even as the ship staggered under mortal damage, the Russian swarm did not relent. More Shahed drones descended from altitude, diving low across the water before striking in waves. Air defenses continued to fire, interceptors streaking upward, tracers carving lines through the smoke. Several drones exploded mid-air, but one managed to strike near the forward turret, triggering another fire. The hull groaned louder with each detonation, plates bending under the relentless punishment. Above, the sky was alive with streaks of fire and falling wreckage, a deadly storm of steel and flame. At 2:48 p.m., another unmanned surface vessel broke through the defense screen. Moving at high speed, it impacted beneath the midsection of the ship. The explosion tore open fresh wounds in the hull, causing immediate, uncontrollable flooding. Water gushed through torn steel, drowning compartments within seconds. The ship's list steepened sharply, tilting toward the sea as its balance collapsed. Flames reached new sections of the superstructure, adding to the chaos. Lifeboats were lowered hastily as the outcome became clear. The Ukrainian flagship had suffered a blow from which it could not recover. By 2:50 p.m., the warship's fate was sealed. The bow dipped into the sea as seawater rushed across the deck. Fires raged unchecked, consuming anything left unbroken. Explosions from inside the hull signaled secondary damage as compartments imploded under pressure. Smoke rolled across the horizon while debris scattered in all directions. The ship, once standing as a symbol of naval resistance, was collapsing into the Black Sea under the weight of Russia's coordinated drone assault. Even as the ship slipped into the sea, Ukraine responded. Within minutes, retaliatory strikes were launched against Russian drone launch sites in occupied Crimea. Long-range missiles arced across the sky, slamming into storage depots, command centers, and coastal bunkers. Explosions lit the shoreline, secondary blasts confirming hits on ammunition caches. The Black Sea coastline burned as Russia's drone infrastructure sustained heavy damage. But the counterstrike could not change the outcome on the water. Ukraine's largest naval vessel was gone, and the Black Sea had entered a new era of drone warfare. By 3 p.m., the Ukrainian warship was gone. The once mighty vessel had slipped beneath the waves, leaving behind only burning oil slicks, floating debris, and scattered lifeboats drifting in the Black Sea. Rescue helicopters hovered above the wreckage, lowering cables to pull survivors from the water. Smoke plumes stretched far into the sky, marking the site of Ukraine's greatest naval loss since the beginning of the war. The ship's destruction was swift, brutal, and final. It was not just the loss of a vessel, it was the loss of a symbol, one meant to show strength in contested waters. News of the sinking spread rapidly. Satellite images confirmed the wreckage, while videos from nearby shores captured fireballs flashing over the horizon. Analysts noted that this was the first time in modern warfare that a major warship had been sunk entirely by unmanned systems. Traditional steel armor, radar arrays, and missile defenses had proven vulnerable when faced with a coordinated swarm. Across Europe and NATO, officials held emergency sessions to analyze what the strike meant for naval security in the Black Sea and beyond. What had once been theory was now fact. Drone warfare had redrawn the battlefield. Inside Russia, the attack was hailed as a decisive success. State media broadcast footage of Shahed drones launching into the sky, celebrating the sinking as proof of Moscow's growing dominance in drone warfare. For Russia, it was more than a tactical win. It was psychological warfare, showing that even Ukraine's largest ship was not safe, even under heavy defense. The strike demonstrated that unmanned systems, cheap and expendable, could defeat billion-dollar vessels built on older doctrines of sea power. It was a message aimed not only at Kyiv, but also at NATO navies watching from afar. Ukraine's retaliation was immediate but symbolic. Precision strikes targeted launch hubs in Crimea, destroying warehouses and control centers used for coordinating the swarm. Fireballs lit up coastal towns as explosions ripped through drone depots. Yet, despite the damage, the loss at sea overshadowed the response. Ukraine had lost its flagship, and with it, a significant portion of its naval presence in the Black Sea. The counterattack proved Ukraine could strike back, but it could not undo what had already happened on the water. By mid-afternoon, the world had absorbed the message. Naval warfare had entered a new era where swarms of drones, airborne and maritime, could defeat traditional fleets. Russia had shown that dominance no longer relied solely on steel, missiles, or armor, but on numbers, coordination, and speed. Ukraine, despite its determination, learned the harsh lesson that even its most powerful ship could not withstand such an onslaught. The Black Sea had become a testing ground, and the rules of war had been rewritten. What happened at 2:20 p.m. was not just the sinking of a warship. It was the beginning of a new chapter in modern conflict, one where the swarm decides the sea. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Every idea helps us understand the future of naval warfare. If you found this video valuable, hit like and subscribe so you won't miss our next frontline breakdown. This is Navy Point, where every battle tells a story. See you on the next mission.